it must be understood that man consists of two parts, essence and personality. Essence in man is what is his own. Personality in man is what is not his own. Not his own means what has come from outside, what he has learned or reflects, all traces of exterior impressions left in the memory and in the sensations, all words and movements that have been learned, all feelings created by imitation. All this is not his own. All this is personality. From the point of view of ordinary psychology, the division of man into personality and essence is hardly comprehensible. It is more exact to say that such a division does not exist in psychology at all. A small child has no personality as yet. He is what he really is. He is essence. His desires, tastes, likes, dislikes express his being such as it is. But as soon as so-called education begins, personality begins to grow. Personality is created partly by the intentional influences of other people, that is, by education, and partly by involuntary imitation of them by the child itself. In the creation of personality, a great part is also played by resistance to people around him, and by attempts to conceal from them something that is his own or real. Essence is the truth in man, personality is the false. But in proportion as personality grows, essence manifests itself more and more rarely and more feebly, and it very often happens that essence stops in its growth at a very early age and grows no further. It happens very often that the essence of a grown-up man, even that of a very intellectual and, in the accepted meaning of the word, highly educated man, stops on the level of a child of 5 or 6. This means that everything we see in this man is in reality not his own. What is own in man, that is, his essence, is usually only manifested in his instincts and in his simplest emotions. There are cases, however, when a man's essence grows in parallel with his personality. Such cases represent very rare exceptions, especially in the circumstances of cultured life. Essence has more chances of development in men who live nearer to nature in difficult conditions of constant struggle and danger. But as a rule, the personality of such people is very little developed. They have more of what is their own, but very little of what is not their own. That is to say, they lack education and instruction. They lack culture. Culture creates personality, and is at the same time the product and the result of personality. We do not realise that the whole of our life, all we call civilization, all we call science, philosophy, art and politics, is created by people's personality, that is, by what is not their own in them. The element that is not his own differs from what is man's own by the fact that it can be lost, altered or taken away by artificial means. There exists a possibility of experimental verification of the relation of personality to essence. In Eastern schools, ways and means are known by the help of which it is possible to separate man's personality from his essence. For this purpose, they sometimes use hypnosis, sometimes special narcotics, sometimes certain kind of exercises. If personality and essence are for a time separated in a man by one or another of these means, two beings, as it were, are formed in him, who speak in different voices, have completely different tastes, aims and interests, and one of these two beings often proves to be on the level of a small child. Continuing the experiment further, it is possible to put one of these beings to sleep, or the experiment may begin by putting to sleep either personality or essence. Certain narcotics have the property of putting personality to sleep without affecting essence. And for a certain time after taking this narcotic, a man's personality disappears, as it were, and only his essence remains. And it happens that a man full of the most varied and exalted ideas, full of sympathies and antipathies, love, hatred, attachments, patriotism, habits, tastes, desires, convictions, suddenly proves quite empty, without thoughts, without feelings, without convictions, without views. Everything that has agitated him before now leaves him completely indifferent. Sometimes he sees the artificiality and the imaginary character of his usual moods or his high-sounding words. Sometimes he simply forgets them as though they had never existed. Things for which he was ready to sacrifice his life now appear to him ridiculous and meaningless and unworthy of his attention. All that he can find in himself is a small number of instinctive inclinations and tastes. He is fond of sweets, he likes warmth, he dislikes cold, he dislikes the thought of work, or on the contrary, he likes the idea of physical movement. And that is all. Sometimes, though very seldom, and sometimes when it is least expected, essence proves fully grown and fully developed in a man, even in cases of undeveloped personality. And in this case, essence unites together everything that is serious and real in a man. But this happens very seldom. As a rule, a man's essence is either primitive, savage and childish, or else simply stupid. The development of essence depends on work on oneself. A very important moment in the work on oneself is when a man begins to distinguish between his personality and his essence. A man's real I, his individuality, can grow only from his essence. It can be said that a man's individuality is his essence, grown up, mature. But in order to enable essence to grow up, it is first of all necessary to weaken the constant pressure of personality upon it, because the obstacles to the growth of essence are contained in personality. If we take an average cultured man, we shall see that in the vast majority of cases his personality is the active element in him, while his essence is the passive element. The inner growth of a man cannot begin so long as this order of things remains unchanged. Personality must become passive and essence must become active. This can happen only if buffers are removed or weakened, because buffers are the chief weapon by the help of which personality holds essence in subjection. As has been said earlier, in the case of less cultured people, essence is often more highly developed than it is in cultured man. It would seem that they ought to be nearer the possibility of growth, but in reality it is not so, because their personality proves to be insufficiently developed. For inner growth, for work on oneself, a certain development of personality as well as a certain strength of essence are necessary. Personality consists of roles and of buffers resulting from a certain work of the centres. An insufficiently developed personality means a lack of roles, that is, a lack of knowledge, a lack of information, a lack of the material upon which work on oneself must be based. Without some store of knowledge, without a certain amount of material not his own, a man cannot begin to work on himself. He cannot begin to study himself. He cannot begin to struggle with his mechanical habits, simply because there will be no reason or motive for undertaking such work. It does not mean that all the ways are closed to him. The way of the fakir and the way of the monk, which do not require any intellectual development, remain open to him. But the methods and the means which are possible for a man of a developed intellect are impossible for him. Thus, evolution is equally difficult for a cultured or an uncultured man. A cultured man lives far from nature, far from natural conditions of existence, in artificial conditions of life, developing his personality at the expense of his essence. A less cultured man, living in more normal and more natural conditions, develops his essence at the expense of his personality. A successful beginning of work on oneself requires the happy occurrence of an equal development of personality and essence. Such an occurrence will give the greatest assurance of success. If essence is very little developed, a long, preparatory period of work is required, and this work will be quite fruitless if a man's essence is rotten inside or if it develops some irreparable defects. Conditions of this kind occur fairly often. An abnormal development of personality very often arrests the development of essence at such an early stage that the essence becomes a small deformed thing. From a small deformed thing, nothing else can be got. Moreover, it happens fairly often that essence dies in a man while his personality and his body are still alive. A considerable percentage of the people we meet in the streets of a great town are people who are empty inside, that is, they are actually already dead. It is fortunate for us that we do not see and do not know it. If we knew what a number of people are actually dead and what a number of these dead people govern our lives, we should go mad with horror. And indeed, people often do go mad because they find out something of this nature without the proper preparation, that is, they see something they are not supposed to see. In order to see without danger, one must be on the way. If a man who can do nothing sees the truth, he will certainly go mad. Only this rarely happens. Usually everything is so arranged that a man can see nothing prematurely. Personality sees only what it likes to see and what does not interfere with its life. It never sees what it does not like. This is both good and bad at the same time. It is good if a man wants to sleep, bad if he wants to awaken.